The ship was called the UHS Cradle, and it was exactly what its name suggested. It carried life, it carried hope, it carried 1,400 human souls who had nothing left except the small bags on their backs and the quiet wish to start over. Somewhere safe. The Kepler-22 settlements had burned. Border conflict between two alien factions, one the humans had nothing to do with, had spilled across 3 systems and swallowed the outer colonies whole. The people aboard the Cradle were not soldiers, they were not diplomats, they were farmers, teachers, mechanics, and doctors. They were parents, and among the 1,400, 600 of them were children. The Cradle moved slowly through deep space. It was not a military vessel. It had no weapons worth mentioning, no shield strong enough to stop a serious attack. It was a transport, a big, clumsy, lumbering ship that existed only to carry people from one place to another. The crew of 60 worked hard to keep it moving, to keep the systems running, to keep 1,400 scared and tired people fed and calm. Captain Inez Rocha stood on the bridge and watched the stars. She had made this route 4 times before. It was supposed to be safe. The Galactic Concord had declared this stretch of space protected corridor. Any attack here would be a direct violation of 17 different treaties. She was thinking about that fact, about those treaties, when the Verg ships appeared. They came out of faster than light travel without warning, 3 warships dropping into real space less than 40 km from the Cradle. They were dark and angular, built to look like predators, every surface sharp and deliberate. The Verg Dominion had been building warships for 600 years. They were very good at it. Rocha hit the emergency beacon before anyone told her to. Her hands moved on their own, fingers finding the right panel, pressing the right sequence. The beacon fired. A tight beam signal shot out toward the nearest Concord relay station, 32 light hours away. Help, if it came, would not come in time. She knew that. She sent the signal anyway. The Verk did not bother with demands. They did not ask the Cradle to stand down or cut engines. They simply fired a disabling pulse that knocked out the ship's drive systems and left it floating dead in space. Then their boarding craft came. There were 200 Verk soldiers. The Cradle security team was 11 people with side arms. It was not a fight, it was a surrender. And Captain Rocha made it quickly, because the alternative was a massacre in the corridors, and she would not let that happen to 1,400 people who had already lost everything once. High Warlord Seathrak came aboard. Personally, he was a large creature, even by Verk standards, broad across the shoulders, his scales a deep greenish black, his eyes flat and gold and utterly cold. He walked through the Cradle's main corridor like he owned it, his soldiers falling in around him, and he looked at the humans gathered against the walls with a kind of expression a man might make when he finds something mildly inconvenient. His translator spoke for him in flat, mechanical tones. Useful cargo will be processed, the rest will be removed. Rocha stepped forward. These are civilians under Concord protection. This ship is in a protected corridor. You are in violation of. One of Seathrak's soldiers pushed her back against the wall, not hard enough to injure her, hard enough to make the point. Seathrak walked on. His officers moved through the ship. Quickly and professionally, they sorted adults who were strong enough to work were marked. Adults who were too old, too young, too small, too sick were set aside. In a second group, children were gathered separately, herded by soldiers, into the ship's main cargo bay, where they sat on the floor in groups, some crying quietly, most too frightened to make any sound at all. Sithrak reviewed the numbers with his logistics officer and made a decision. The adults, 400 of them, would be taken. Slave labor had value. The rest of the adults, approximately 400 more, would be left aboard the disabled ship. They would drift. The conquered would eventually find them, or they would not. It did not matter to Sithrak either way. The children were a different question. His logistics officer pointed out that young humans were not useful as labor. They were too small, too fragile, too slow to train. They ate resources. They made noise. They required supervision. Taking them served no purpose. Leaving them meant a live witness population that would reach conquered space and create a diplomatic incident. Sithrak considered this for approximately 4 seconds. He gave the order. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was a single sentence in the Verk military tongue, delivered with the same tone a man might use to ask for a report to be filed. His soldiers moved to carry it out. What followed lasted 11 minutes. Captain Racha heard it from the corridor, where she was held at gunpoint. She heard it, and there was nothing she could do. She stood against the cold metal wall of her own ship, a soldier's weapon aimed at her chest, and she listened, and something inside her broke in a way that she knew would never fully heal. When the soldiers came back out of the cargo bay, 17 children were not among the dead. They had crawled into the ship's coolant vent system, narrow passages that no adult and no Verk soldier could follow, and they had gone, still and silent in the dark, and they had survived. Sithrak did not know about the 17. His soldiers checked the bay, counted the numbers, and reported the task complete. He was already moving back toward the boarding craft, already thinking about the next system, already done with the cradle. His ships departed 40 minutes after they had arrived. The cradle drifted. Among the adults left aboard, a young engineer named Tomas Vega found a way to get partial power back to a secondary communications array. It took him 3 hours, working alone in a damaged junction room, his hands shaking the entire time. When the array came online, he had enough power for one short burst transmission. He thought about what to say. He thought about how to explain what had happened, how to describe it in words that made sense, how to give coordinates and casualty numbers and tactical information. In the end, he couldn't do any of that. He pressed the transmit key, and he said the only thing that was true. They killed the kids. They killed them all. Then the power cut out again, and the cradle went dark. The signal reached the conquered relay station 32 hours later. It was flagged, decoded, and forwarded to Human Expeditionary Command Headquarters on Earth within minutes. A duty officer named Lieutenant Priya Anand received it, listened to it twice, and then sat very still at her desk for a moment before she picked up the direct line to Admiral Yarachin. Chen was asleep when the call came. She picked up on the second ring. Anand played her the recording. There was a long silence on the line. Forward it, Chen said. Her voice was quiet, completely quiet, the kind of quiet that has no bottom to it. Forward. It's to everyone, every government, every command, every public channel we have access to. Admiral Protocol says we confirm first. Before. Forward it, Chen said again. Now. Anand forwarded it. The signal went out across every human network, every government frequency, every public broadcast channel that human hands had ever built. It reached Earth in 4 minutes. It reached every human colony, station, and outpost. Within the hour. A 3-second recording, a man's broken voice, 8 words. Within 4 minutes of the signal hitting Earth's surface, every human government on record had opened an emergency session. Within 6 minutes, every single one of them had voted the same way. There were no dissenting voices, not one, not anywhere. For the first time in the long and complicated and often divided history of the human species, every single human institution capable of making a decision made the same decision at the same time. The Vuric Dominion had just run out of time. The Galactic Concord had existed for over 2,000 years. In that time it had survived wars, plagues, political collapses, and the extinction of 3 member species. It had seen empires rise and fall. It had negotiated treaties between beings who breathed methane and beings who lived in liquid ammonia. It was by every measure an organization that had seen everything. It had never seen anything like this. The emergency session was called within hours of the signal reaching Concord headquarters on the neutral station of Vale Prime. Representatives from over 200 species filled the great circular chamber, their translators humming, their aides whispering behind them. The air smelled of a dozen different atmospheres mixed together, filtered and recycled, and the noise of 200 delegations trying to speak at once was enormous. The human delegation sat quietly in their seats and said nothing. That more than anything else made the other species nervous. Ambassador Dale Ossay represented humanity at the Concord table. He was a tall man in his 50s, with dark skin and gray at his temples, and the kind of calm that comes not from ease but from long practice. He had spent 20 years in diplomacy. He had sat through arguments and crises and moments that seemed like the end of everything. He was very good at appearing composed. Today he was not composed. He was simply still. There was a difference, and the beings who had worked with him long enough knew it. The Thavor representative, an ancient creature called Sire Lindra, moved through the crowd and came to sit beside him. The Thavor were among the oldest species in the Concord, tall, slow-moving, with pale blue skin and eyes that had seen 3,000 years of history. They were the closest thing the galaxy had to wise elders, and most species listened when they spoke. Lindra placed one long hand gently on the table between them. Ambassador Ossay, she said softly, what your people lost was terrible. The Concord condemns it fully, but we ask that humanity step back from the edge. Let us pursue this through proper channels, tribunals, sanctions, reparations. The Vuric Dominion will be held accountable through law. Ossay looked at her for a long moment. Sierra Lindra, he said, with great respect for you personally, how many of your children were in that cargo bay? She had no answer for that. The Vuric have already responded, Oss continued. His voice was even almost gentle. Their High Council released a statement an hour ago. They described The event as a tactical inconvenience. Those were their exact words, a tactical inconvenience. The chamber had gone quieter around them. Other representatives were listening. Your tribunals and your sanctions, as I said, are not something humanity is interested in discussing right now. Alindra leaned forward. Revenge will not bring them back. Acting in grief and rage will only. We are not acting in rage, as I said. And the way he said it stopped her completely, not loud, not sharp, just certain, in a way that left no room for argument. That is what I need you to understand. That is what every species in this room needs to understand before they make the mistake of trying to stop us. He stood up slowly and looked around the chamber. Every eye, every sensor, every visual organ in the room turned toward him. Revenge, he said clearly, is personal. Revenge is hot. Revenge is something you feel in your chest and act on before you think. What humanity is doing right now is not revenge. It is something older than that, something much colder. He paused to let the translators catch up. Every species in this room has children. You protect them, you care for them. That is natural, that is biological, but for humans, something happens when a child is harmed that goes beyond the parents, beyond the family, beyond even the community. It spreads, it moves through our entire species like a current through water. Every person who has ever loved a child, and among humans that is nearly everyone, feels it. Not anger, not grief, something beneath both of those things. Something that has no clean word in any language I know. He looked at Alindra directly. You said, do not act in grief, but you misunderstand us. We are not sending our military because we are grieving. We are sending ourselves, all of us, because what the Verk did was not an act of war. It was an act that placed them outside the category of things we are willing to share a galaxy with. The chamber was completely silent. Asai sat back down. He folded his hands on the table. He was done speaking. On the other side of the station, in a private archive room that very few people had access to, the Tal'Vari High Archivist was already 3 hours into reading. His name was Sorvan, and he was the oldest living Tal'Vari, 2,911 years old by human counting. He had personally witnessed the fall of the Dravari hegemony, the Silence War, and the collapse of the Ninth Conquered Assembly. He had read the histories of species long dead. He thought he understood the full range of what sapient life was capable of. He had not until now read deeply into human history. His aide had pulled the files at his request, not the diplomatic summaries or the cultural overview documents that the Conquered kept for new member species, but the raw historical records, the actual history, the full version. Sorvan read about a conflict called the Second World War. He read the numbers. He read about the firebombing of cities, the industrial scale of the violence, the complete and total mobilization of an entire civilization toward the single goal of destroying an enemy. He read about unconditional surrender, human concept that meant not peace, not ceasefire, not negotiation, but the complete and total elimination of an opponent's ability to ever fight again. He read about a weapon called the atomic bomb and the cold logic by which humans had decided to use it. He read about the Mongol expansion. He read about Rome. He read about a dozen other conflicts in which humans had When pushed past a certain point, stopped fighting wars and started ending civilizations. Then he read about what made humans stop, what pulled them back, what they chose when given the chance to do with their enemies after the fighting was over. He read about rebuilding, about the Marshall Plan, about food aid sent to former enemies, about the strange human habit of helping the people they had just finished defeating. He sat with all of this for a long time. Then he called his aide and dictated 2 messages. The first was to his home world's planetary defense network. It was a simple instruction: raise the shields, run a full systems check, and keep them raised until further notice. His aide looked surprised but did not question him. The second message was to the Verkai Council. He wrote it himself, which was unusual. Normally he dictated. This one he typed slowly, word by word, because he wanted to be sure of every sentence. It was short. To the High Council of the Verk Dominion, my name is Sorvon. I have lived for nearly 3,000 years, and I have watched more civilizations end than you have years of recorded history. I am writing to tell you that you have made a mistake from which there is no recovery. I have spent the last 3 hours reading about the species you have chosen to harm, and I want you to understand something clearly. They are not like us. They are not like anyone. When most species go to war, they fight until one side wins. When humans go to war, truly go to war the way they are going to war right now, they do not stop until the thing they were fighting against no longer exists. You killed their children. I am sorry, not for what humanity is going to do. I am sorry because there is nothing I or anyone in the conquered can do to stop it, and there is nothing you can do to prevent what is coming. The only advice I can give you is this: do not make it worse. I am sorry. He sent the message, then he sat back in his chair and closed his eyes and thought about those 17 children hiding in the dark of a coolant vent, and about the man on the communications array who had found the strength to send 8 words into the void. Outside the archive window, the stars were very still and very far away. He thought they looked tonight a little like they were waiting. Back in the main chamber, the conquered session had dissolved into noise. Species argued, proposals were made and rejected. Committees were formed to draft resolutions that everyone in the room knew would accomplish nothing. Ambassador Ose had already left. He had a call to take. Admiral Chen was on the line, and she had numbers to go over. Fleet numbers, mobilization timelines, supply chains, targeting priorities. He walked through the corridor of Vale Prime Station, past alien delegates and aides and journalists from 40 species. And none of them stopped him because something in the way he walked told them not to. His communicator buzzed. He answered it. Ambassador Chen's voice, calm and deep and absolutely focused. We're ready to begin. I need authorization. Ase stopped walking. He looked out the long viewport at the stars beyond the station glass. You have it, he said. He put the communicator away and kept walking. Behind him, the conquered chamber argued on filling the air with words that no longer had any power to change what was coming. Ahead of him, in 31,000 ships spread across human space, engines were beginning to warm up. The Verk Dominion had 14 star systems under its control. It had been a dominant power in its region of the galaxy for over 4 centuries. Its military was large, experienced, and brutal. Its warships were fast and well-armed. Its soldiers had fought and won wars against 6 different species in the last 200 years, and it had never once lost a conflict that it chose to start. The Verk High Council reviewed the human mobilization data and was not particularly worried. The numbers were significant, they admitted. 31,000 ships was more than they had expected. The speed of the mobilization was unusual, but humans were a young species. Young species made emotional decisions. They would come in hard and fast, take losses, and then come to the table once the reality of fighting a real war set in. That was how it always worked. That was how every conflict the Verk had ever fought had gone. Their top military advisor, a scarred veteran named Commander Drev, stood before the council and laid out the plan. They would let the humans come to them. They would meet them at the border systems with their full fleet. There would be a major engagement. Humans would take heavy casualties. Then negotiations would begin, and the Verk would dictate the terms. It was a clean plan, a logical plan. It was the wrong plan entirely. Admiral not slept in 40 hours and did not intend to sleep for another 40. She stood at the center of the command floor of the HEC flagship, the UHS Relentless, surrounded by screens and officers, and the constant low hum of a warship at full readiness. She was a compact woman, 53 years old, with short gray hair and dark eyes that moved constantly across screens, across maps, across the faces of her officers, reading everything at once. She had been a naval officer for 30 years. She had fought in 2 smaller conflicts and studied every major war. Human history. She understood something about warfare that the Verk, for all their experience, had never fully learned. You did not win wars by defeating armies. You won wars by making armies. Impossible. The plan she had built over the last 72 hours with her senior staff was not complicated. It was not elegant. It was thorough, which was better than both of those things. Every Verk shipyard in 14 systems had been mapped. Every fuel depot, every supply station, every communications relay, every repair facility, every logistics hub. The entire nervous system of the Verk war machine had been charted down to the last installation. The Verk fleet was sitting at the border, waiting to fight. Chen was not going to the border. She divided her 31,000 ships into 14 task forces and sent them in all directions at once. Operation Hollow Crown began at 300 hours conquered standard time on a Tuesday. The first thing the Verk lost was their ability to talk to each other. Human electronic warfare units hit every major communications relay in all 14 systems in the opening minutes of the operation. Not destroyed, disabled, jammed, filled with noise. The Verk fleet at the border began sending signals to their command centers and received nothing back. Their command centers tried to reach the fleet and heard only static. For the first 6 hours of the operation, the most powerful military force in that region of space was essentially blind and deaf. The second thing they lost was their ability to build new ships. Verk shipyards were enormous structures, decades old, irreplaceable in any short time frame. Human strike teams hit them with precision, not carpet bombing, not the kind of raw destructive force that would have killed thousands of Verk workers. Chen had been very specific about that: targeted strikes, the dry docks, the fabrication arms, the power cores that ran the construction systems. The yards themselves were left standing, largely intact. They simply no longer functioned. Repairing them would take years. The third thing they lost was their fuel. Verk warships ran on a refined energy compound that required large, complex processing stations to produce. There were 11 such stations across the 14 systems. Human teams found all 11. By hour 4 of the operation, 10 of them had been disabled. The 11th was located inside a civilian population center, and Chen had pulled that strike team back rather than risk civilian casualties. The Varak fleet at the border had fuel for approximately 3 weeks of sustained operations. After that, their ships were very large, very expensive, very heavily armed pieces of drifting metal. The fourth thing they lost was their confidence in the observation deck of a Kreth military intelligence vessel positioned at the edge of the conflict zone. General Harrow of the Kreth Defense Command watched the tactical feeds with his senior staff. The Kreth were professional soldiers. Their species had been fighting organized wars for 10,000 years. They had military traditions older than most civilizations. They considered themselves among the finest strategic minds in the galaxy. They watched in complete silence for 2 hours. Harrow's aide, a young officer named Tesvek, finally spoke. They didn't engage the fleet, she said. It came out sounding almost like a question, like she needed someone to confirm what she was seeing. No, Harrow said. They went around it. Yes. They hit everything that supports the fleet without engaging the fleet itself. Yes. Tesvek looked at her screens. The Varak army is fully intact. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon, and it doesn't matter. It will matter in about 3 weeks, Harrow said, when their ships can't move and their commanders can't communicate and they have no way to repair or replace anything that breaks. An army that cannot be supplied is not an army. It is a problem waiting to be solved at your convenience. He was quiet for a moment, watching the feeds. These creatures, he said slowly, almost to himself, they don't fight wars, they end them. He turned to his communications officer. Send a message to Kretha High Command. Tell them I recommend we review every defense treaty we currently have with species that border human space and make sure those treaties are very clearly and very obviously in order. His communications officer looked up. Do you think humans would? No, Harrow said. I think humans are extremely unlikely to ever come for us. I am suggesting we make absolutely certain we never give them a reason to. On the 4th day of the operation, Admiral Chen received a different kind of mission. Intelligence had located the 17 surviving children from the cradle. They were being held in a temporary Verk facility in the 3rd system, not a military base, not a prison, but a processing station that the Verk had apparently been using to sort through items taken from various raided ships. The children had been put there because no one in the Verk chain of command had quite figured out what to do with them. Chen looked at the location data for a long time, then she made a decision that surprised her staff. She took the mission herself. She did not send a strike team, she did Not call in a combat unit, she put together a crew of 12 people, medical staff, a child psychologist, 2 translators, and 4 security officers. And she took a small, fast, unmarked shuttle into the third system herself. They came in under the cover of the ongoing operation, moving through the confusion of a Verk command structure that was already badly disrupted. The processing station had a garrison of 40 soldiers. By the time Chen's shuttle arrived, 36 of those soldiers had already evacuated. Not because anyone had attacked them, but because the communications blackout had left them with no orders and no information, and frightened soldiers with no orders tend to make decisions that prioritize their own survival. The 4 soldiers who remained saw the shuttle land and walked out of the facility with their hands raised before anyone had even opened the shuttle door. They did not know who was coming. They did not know what was happening in the rest of their empire. They knew only that everything had gone very wrong very fast, and they wanted no part of whatever came next. Chen walked into the facility. The children were in a storage room near the back, a large space with low ceilings and harsh lighting, smelling of recycled air and fear. They had been given water and basic food, which was something, not enough, but something. They were sitting in small groups, leaning against walls and against each other, some sleeping, some staring at nothing. When the door opened, they flinched as one, every small body going tense at once. Chen stepped inside alone, no uniform, insignia, no weapon visible. She crouched down so she was not towering over them, and she looked at the closest group of children, 4 of them, ages maybe 6 to 10, holding each other's hands, and she said very quietly, in plain, simple words, "My name is Yara, I'm human, I came to take you home." Nobody moved for a moment, then a small girl, perhaps 7 years old, with a torn sleeve and dried tear tracks on her face, stood up and walked across the room and wrapped both arms around Chen's neck. Chen held her, she held all of them. Her medical team came in behind her and got to work, and Chen stayed on the floor of that storage room for a long time, not as an admiral, not as a commander, just as a human being who had needed very badly to look these children in the face. She did not cry until she was back on the shuttle with the door closed. Then she cried for a long time, and nobody on her crew said a word about it because 3 of them were crying too. By the end of the first week, every major Verk military installation in 11 of the 14 systems had been neutralized. The Verk fleet at the border was intact, fully armed, and completely unable to do anything meaningful with any of that. Their commanders were sending runners, actual physical messengers on ships, because it was the only way to communicate. Their supply lines were gone, their repair capabilities were gone, their ability to build replacements was gone. The Verk High Council, for the first time in 4 centuries of dominance, called an emergency session to discuss not strategy but survival. Commander Drev, the military advisor who had promised them a quick and manageable conflict, stood before them and said something he had never said in 40 years of service. "I don't know how to stop this," he said. The council chamber was very quiet. Outside, in 14 systems, 31,000 human ships continued their work with the steady, unhurried patience of people who had already decided how this ended and or simply moving through the steps required to get there. They were not in a hurry, they did not need to be. They had already won, they just hadn't finished yet. High Warlord Sithrek was not captured in battle. There was no dramatic last stand, no final charge, no moment where he raised his weapon and chose to go down fighting. When the end came for him, it came quietly in a small room in the basement of his command citadel on the capital world of Drevos, where he had been hiding for 9 days with 3 aides and enough food for 2 weeks. He had a plan, he always had a plan. The plan was to wait. Humans were emotional. Emotional species burned hot and fast, and then cooled. He would wait them out. Eventually, the conquered would pressure them into a ceasefire. Eventually, diplomacy would take over. Eventually, this would become a political problem instead of a military one, and political problems could be managed. He was very good at managing political problems. He was still explaining this plan to his aides on the 9th day when the door to the basement room opened. 3 humans walked in. Not soldiers, not in armor. They wore plain gray clothes with small conquered diplomatic identification tags on their chest pockets. One was a tall woman with red hair and a data pad under her arm. One was a shorter man with glasses and a calm, professional expression. The third was a young person who appeared to be taking notes on a small device. They had no weapons that Sithrak could see. His 3 aides immediately reached for their sidearms. "Please don't," the tall woman said, not alarmed, not aggressive, just matter of fact, like she was asking them not to track mud through a clean hallway. "There are 42 soldiers directly above us who are being very patient. If we're not back upstairs in 10 minutes, they will stop being patient. I'd rather we all walk out of here." The aides looked at Sithrak. He looked at the 3 humans. He thought about his plan. Wait, outlast, manage the political problem, and for the first time in a very long time, High Warlord Sithrak could not find a next move. He put his hands in front of him, palms out. "Good," the tall woman said. "My name is Director Reyes. You're coming with us." The tribunal was held on Vale Prime in the Galactic Concord's main judicial chamber. It was the largest formal proceeding the Concord had convened in over a century. Representatives from 90 species attended in person. Another 140 watched remotely. Every major news network in the galaxy carried it live. Sithrak sat at the center of the chamber in a containment seat. Not a cage, not restraints, just a chair with a low energy field around it that would prevent him from moving quickly. His legal counsel, provided by Concord Standard Process, sat beside him. He had been cleaned up, given proper food and water, treated for minor injuries he had sustained during his 9 days in hiding. The Concord followed its procedures. Humans, for the moment, were following them too. The panel of judges represented 7 species. The human delegate was a woman named Director General Amara Voss, head of the Human Expeditionary Command's Legal Division. She was 60 years old, thin and precise, with white hair cut close to her head, and a way of sitting completely still that made her seem carved from something solid and permanent. She had said almost nothing during the first 2 days of proceedings. Sithrak's legal counsel had been thorough. They had filed motions, challenged jurisdiction, questioned the chain of custody of evidence, and raised Procedural objections at every opportunity. It was good legal work. It was exactly what the process allowed. The other judges had listened patiently, ruled on each motion carefully, and allowed the proceedings to move forward in proper order. On the third day, Sethrek's counsel invoked Article 9 of Concord military law. Article 9 was old, written into the Concord's founding legal code over 1,000 years ago. It gave a military commander the right to claim wartime necessity for decisions made during active conflict. It had been used successfully in tribunal proceedings 14 times in Concord history. It was a legitimate legal argument. Every judge on the panel turned to look at Director General Voss. She had not moved. She was looking at a small data chip on the table in front of her. She had placed it there at the start of the day's session and had not touched it since. Director General Voss, the chief judge, said, "The defense has invoked Article 9. Do you wish to respond?" Voss picked up the data chip. She stood up slowly. She looked at Sethrek's for a moment, not with anger, not with hatred, just with the same quality of absolute stillness that she had carried into the room on the first day. She walked to the chamber's central display panel and placed the chip into the reader. "I would like to play something for the court," she said. She pressed play. She walked back to her seat and sat down. What played on the display was the security footage from the UHS cradle. It ran for 11 minutes. It had no narration. It needed none. The chamber was silent in a way that chambers rarely are, not the silence of people waiting for something to happen, but the silence of people who have stopped breathing. When it ended, Voss did not stand up. Again, she spoke from her seat. "The defense has argued wartime necessity," she said. "I want to address that argument directly. The Verk Dominion was not at war with humanity on the day this happened. There was no conflict. There had been no provocation. The UHS cradle was a civilian transport in a protected corridor. The people aboard it had done nothing to the Verk Dominion or to anyone else. They were refugees." She paused. The children on that ship were between the ages of 3 and 14. They posed no threat to any Verk soldier or to any Verk interest. They were killed because they were considered inconvenient. Article 9 covers military decisions made in the context of active conflict against a military opponent. It does not cover this. Nothing covers this. She stopped speaking. The room stayed quiet. Sethrek's counsel leaned over and whispered something to him. Sethrak straightened in his seat. He had spent the last 3 days watching the proceedings go in directions he did not like, and he had been patient, but he was done being patient. He was a high warlord. He had commanded armies. He was not going to sit silently while a human woman dismissed 4 centuries of Verk military authority. He activated his right to address the court directly. "I will speak," he said through his translator. The chief judge nodded. Sethrek looked at Voss. "Human young are not visually distinguishable from small human adults by Verk sensory perception. The decision made aboard that vessel was based on incomplete biological data. It was." "We know," Voss said. Sethrek stopped. Voss was not looking at him with triumph. She was not looking at him with anger. She was looking at him with something that was much harder to face than either of those things. We know that you cannot easily tell our children from our adults by sight, she said. That fact is in your own biological assessment reports, which we recovered from your command citadel. We know you knew that before you boarded that ship. She let that sit for a moment. That is why, she said quietly, this is not about you anymore. Sithrak did not fully understand what she meant he would later. But in that moment, he simply went still, because something in her voice told him that whatever came next was already decided and had been decided long before. He walked into this chamber. The trial of Sithrak lasted 4 more days. The verdict was not in question. What took time was the full legal construction of the case, the documentation, the witness testimonies, the forensic evidence from the cradle. All of it entered into the permanent record of the Galactic Concord so that it could never be erased, never be revised, never be claimed to be something other than what it was. Sithrak was convicted on 41 counts. He was sentenced to permanent confinement in a Concord maximum security facility. He would live out the rest of his natural life there. He would receive food, medical care, and shelter. He would not be harmed. He would simply never be free again. He had expected execution. The sentence confused him. Commander Drev, brought in afterward, asked the human officer why Sithrak had not simply been killed. The officer thought about it for a moment. Killing him would have been the end of it, the officer said. This way he has to keep living with what he did, and the record stays open. People can keep reading it. It doesn't close. Drift thought about that for a long time. The hunt for the Verk High Council began the day after Sithrak's conviction. All 44 members had fled in the weeks following the start of Operation Hollow Crown. They had scattered across Concord space and beyond, using false identities, safe houses, intermediaries, every resource that 4 centuries of political power could provide. Some had gone to neutral systems. Some had paid for protection from minor species who thought the money was worth the risk. 2 had reached the very edge of explored space and hidden in stations so remote that finding them should, by any reasonable estimate, have taken years. It took 11 months, 44 targets, 44 recoveries. Every single one. No one who helped hide them was paid enough to make it worth it. No safe house was far enough. No false identity was clean enough. Human intelligence teams worked with the patience and precision of people who were not operating on a deadline, because they had already decided that there was no version of events in which this did not end with all 44 in custody. When the last council member was brought in, found in a decommissioned fuel station at the edge of an unmapped system 400 light-years from Verk space, the officer who made the arrest sent a single-line report back to HEC headquarters. That's all of them. Chen read the report. She forwarded it to Ambassador Asai. He forwarded it to the Concord Chamber. The chamber received it in session, and for the first time in the entire proceeding, several of the alien delegates began to understand something they had been told, but had not quite believed until now. When humans said they would find someone, they found them. Every single one. In the weeks following the final arrest, the Galactic Concord's legal committee began drafting a new clause for the Concord's founding charter. The drafting process normally took years. This one was completed in 9 days. The clause was formally titled Amendment 7 of the 3rd Revised Charter, Article 31, Subsection 4. Nobody called it that. Within a week of its circulation, every diplomat, every officer, every legal scholar in the Concord was calling it by the name that a junior Thavery aide had used in an internal memo that somehow became public. They called it the Human Clause. It was simple. It prohibited harm to the juvenile members of any sapient species, under any military, political, or economic justification. The penalties for violation were severe and immediate. There were no exceptions. There was no Article 9 equivalent. Every species in the Concord signed it. They signed it within a week. Not one of them wanted a second lesson. The Verk Dominion did not end in fire. That surprised many people who had watched the whole thing unfold. They had expected a final battle, a last dramatic strike, some large and terrible moment that would mark the definitive end of 4 centuries of Verk power. Stories like this one, they assumed, ended with something burning. But humans had been very deliberate from the beginning about what they were doing and what they were not doing. They were not destroying the Verk people. They were not bombing cities or poisoning systems or doing any of that things that a species acting purely out of rage might have done. They were doing something more careful and in its own way more permanent. They were taking apart the machine. The Verk military was formally dissolved. Under the terms of the Concord supervised settlement, every warship was decommissioned, the weapons were collected and destroyed. The military academies were closed, the command structures that had existed for 4 centuries were dismantled rank by rank, until nothing was left of them but records in a Concord archive. Verk soldiers were not imprisoned. Most of them had simply been following orders inside a system they had been born into. And humans understood the difference between a system and the people inside it. The soldiers were released and sent home. The 14 systems of the former Verk Dominion were placed under Concord supervision. New local governments were formed, advised but not controlled by Concord representatives. Infrastructure was rebuilt. Trade routes were reopened. The Verk people, most of whom had lived their entire lives inside an empire that made decisions they had no say in, were given for the first time something that resembled a choice about their own future. Human peacekeepers were assigned to assist with the transition. The Verk civilian population, upon learning that their peacekeepers were human, cooperated with every request immediately and without complaint. Some observers found this remarkable. The humans assigned to the job did not find it remarkable at all. They had not come to punish civilians. They had come to make sure things stayed stable while the new structures took hold. They did their jobs professionally and without cruelty, and the people they worked with could tell the difference between that and what they had lived under before. Slowly, carefully, the 14 systems began to breathe again. There were no parades on Earth. This was the thing that confused outside observers more than anything else about humanity. In the months following the end of the conflict, every other species that had ever won a significant military engagement had celebrated. There were ceremonies, speeches, monuments built, while the memory was still fresh and the pride was still warm. Victory was something you marked. It was something you displayed. Humans held one public ceremony. It was not a victory celebration, it was a memorial. It was held on Earth in a large open park in the city of Nairobi on a clear morning in early autumn. There were no military flyovers, no weapons on display, no speeches about strength or dominance or what humanity had proven to the galaxy. There was a long, wide wall of pale gray stone, and on that wall were 600 names carved in letters small enough that you had to stand close to read them, which meant that everyone who came stood close to the wall and stood still and stayed for a while. 600 names, every child from the cradle. The ceremony was attended by heads of government from every human nation and colony. It was also attended quietly and without announcement by representatives from 43 alien species who came on their own initiative, without being asked, without coordinating with each other. They brought things, flowers from their home world, small stones, woven items, containers of scented materials that humans could not identify but understood were offered in grief. They placed these things at the base of the wall and stood with the humans in the quiet of the morning. Nobody had organized this, nobody had sent invitations, it simply happened because 43 species had watched everything unfold from the beginning and had arrived in their own time and in their own way at the same conclusion, that they should have done something sooner and that the least they could do now was show up and stand there. Admiral Chen attended alone, without her staff, without her uniform. She wore plain clothes and stood near the end of the wall for a long time. Reading names, she found the section where the youngest children were listed. She stood there the longest. At some point, the small girl from the storage room on Verk 3, whose name Chen had learned was Amara, the same name as Director General Voss, which felt like the kind of coincidence that meant something even if you couldn't say what, found her in the crowd and took her hand. Without saying anything, Chen held it. They stood together at the wall until the morning was nearly gone. The 17 survivors grew up. This was not a small thing. For a long time it had not seemed certain. Some of them carried what had happened inside the cradle in ways that took years of careful, patient support to begin to heal. Some of them had nights that were very bad for a very long time. Some of them were angry in ways that did not go away quickly, and the adults around them understood that this was not a problem to be fixed but a weight to be shared. And they shared it without complaint for as long as it was needed. They were given every resource humanity could offer: schools, doctors, quiet places when quiet was needed, people who listened without trying to rush them toward being okay before they were ready. The Concord's member species contributed to Tal Vori educational materials, Credi's therapeutic practices, a dozen other offerings from species who were not human and had not experienced what these children had experienced, but who understood at least. That support did not require perfect understanding. The 17 grew up, they became people, they became engineers and teachers and artists and doctors, and in one case, a diplomat. Her name was Sola Mwangi. She had been 9 years old on the cradle. She had been one of the 17 who crawled into the coolant vents and went still and silent in the dark. She had red-tinged memories of that day that she had spent years learning to carry without being crushed by them. And she had decided somewhere in her teenage Years that the best thing she could do, with everything that had happened to her, was to make sure it meant something. Going forward, she became a conquered ambassador at 28 years old, the youngest human ever appointed to the position. Her first address to the full conquered chamber was short. She had been offered time for a long speech and had declined. Most of it, she stood at the human delegation's podium and looked out at 200 species and said what she had come to say. I was on the cradle, she said. Some of you know that. I'm not here to talk about what happened there. I'm here because my people decided that I should have a seat at this table, and I think the reason they decided that is the same reason I decided to take it. She paused. We are not here because humanity is the strongest species in this room. Maybe we are, and maybe we are not. That is not the point. We are here because a long time ago humans made a decision, not in a meeting, not in a policy document, but somewhere deep in the way we are built. That strength without love is just violence with better weapons. That power without care is just danger wearing a uniform. She looked around the room slowly. The Verk were powerful. They had ships and soldiers and 400 years of dominance. None of it saved them when they forgot that basic thing. Don't any of you forget it either. She sat down. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then it was not silent at all. In the years that followed, the conquered intelligence database was updated to reflect the events of the conflict. New classification systems were created. New threat assessment categories were written. Species were assessed not just on military capability, but on motivation, history, and the specific conditions under which they became dangerous. For most species, the assessment was relatively straightforward. For humans, the analysts spent a long time trying to find the right language. They wrote and rewrote the entry many times. They consulted historians, psychologists, military strategists, and diplomats. They tried to be accurate and fair and complete. In the end, the final version of the human threat assessment was much shorter than anyone expected. After all the data, all the analysis, all the careful language about military capability and strategic thinking and historical precedent, the assessment came down to a single warning at the top of the file. It was not a threat level. It was not a tactical classification. It was just a line, plain and clear and specific, written so that any species reading it would understand exactly what it meant and exactly what they needed to never do. It read, "Warning, do not harm their young." Below it in smaller text was a single additional note added by the senior analyst who wrote the final draft. It had no official standing. It was not part of the formal classification. He had added it anyway because he felt it was the truest thing he could say. It read, "We watched. We have the records. Trust us on this one." No species that read the file ever asked for clarification. None of them needed it. The emergency alarm screamed through the ship like an angry beast. Red lights flashed on and off, painting the walls in bloody color. Park woke up so fast that he fell out of his sleeping pod and hit the cold metal floor hard. "What the hell?" he said, his voice rough from sleep. The ship's computer spoke in its calm female voice. "Warning, unauthorized life form detected in Cargo Bay 3. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." His heart began to pound. He was alone on the wandering pedal, a cargo ship that he had owned for 7 years. He was 3 weeks into a delivery run through the outer rim, the most empty and lonely part of space. Out here, there were no space stations, no military patrols, no help if something went wrong. And now something had gone very wrong. He grabbed his plasma pistol from under his pillow and checked the power cell. Full charge, good. He pulled on his boots without tying them and moved toward the door. The hallway outside was dark except for the flashing red emergency lights. Shadows jumped and danced on the walls like ghosts. He had been a soldier once, 6 years in the Republic Navy, before he got tired of taking orders from people who had never seen real combat. His body still remembered the training: move quiet, stay low, check your corners, trust nothing. The cargo bay was at the back of the ship, past the engine room and the life support systems. Moved through the narrow corridors with his pistol raised. His breath sounded too loud in his ears. Every creak of the ship made him jump. Computer, he whispered, what kind of life form? Unknown species, small biological mass. Approximately 15 kg, no weapons. Detected. 15 kg, that was small, very small, maybe the size of a dog or a young child. Felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. But he did not lower his weapon. In space, even small things could kill you. He reached the cargo bay door and pressed his back against the wall. Through the small window in the door, he could see the bay inside. It was filled with shipping containers stacked 3 high, holding machine parts and medical supplies bound for a mining colony. The lights in the bay were dim, set to power-saving mode. At first saw nothing unusual, then he noticed movement between 2 containers. Near the back, something small and pale was huddled in the shadows. He took a deep breath and opened the door. The cargo bay was cold, could see his breath forming small clouds in the air. He moved forward slowly, his pistol aimed at the spot where he had seen the movement. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. Come out, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I know you are there. Come out slowly with your hands up. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then heard a sound that made him stop walking. It was a small, broken sound. Sound of fear and pain and sadness all mixed together. It was the sound of crying. Moved around the last container and saw the intruder for the first time. It was a child, at least it looked like a child. The creature had pale blue skin that seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. It had 4 eyes, 2 large ones in the normal place and 2 smaller ones above them, and all 4 eyes were filled with tears. Its body was thin and shaking. It wore torn clothing that might once have been white but was now dirty and stained. In its small hands, it clutched a device that recognized immediately an emergency beacon, the kind that ships launch when they were in serious trouble, the kind that screamed for help across the empty void of space. The creature looked up at him and made that crying sound again. Then it spoke, and its voice was the most pitiful thing had ever heard. Please, it said in broken galactic common, the language that most species used to talk to each other. Please help, they took my family. Stood frozen, his pistol was still raised, still pointed at this small, crying creature. He had been ready for pirates, he had been ready for stowaways trying to steal his cargo. He had been ready for dangerous alien predators that had somehow gotten onto his ship. He had not been ready for this. Computer, he said slowly, Turn on the lights full power. The lights came on and got a better look. At the creature, it was even smaller than he had thought. Its blue skin was covered in small scratches and bruises. Its 4 eyes were red from crying. It looked like it had not eaten in days. Lowered his pistol. "What is your name?" he asked, speaking slowly and clearly. "Riel," the creature said. "My name is Riel. Please help." Put his pistol back in its holster and knelt down so that he was at Riel's eye level. The creature flinched at first, then seemed to realize that was not going to hurt it. "Okay," Riel said, "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is I am the captain of this ship. Can you tell me what happened? How did you get here?" Riel's 4 eyes filled with fresh tears. "Bad ones came, big ones with scales and sharp teeth. They attacked our ship. Mama and Papa put me in escape pod, said to run, said to find help." The creature held up the emergency beacon. "Pod broke. I floated for long time, then your ship came close and I climbed inside." Felt his chest tighten. He had heard stories about slavers in the Outer Rim, criminal groups that attacked peaceful ships, killed anyone who fought back, and sold the survivors to whoever would pay. It was one of the ugliest parts of space travel, and the Galactic Authority never seemed to do anything about it. "How long ago?" he asked. "How long ago did they take your family?" Riel looked confused. "I do not know. 2 days, 3 days. I was in the dark for so long. 2 or 3 days. In space terms, that was both forever and no time at all. The slavers could be anywhere by now, or they could still be nearby sorting through their cargo of stolen people." Stood up and ran his hand through his hair. This was not his problem. He was a cargo runner, not a hero. He had deliveries to make. He had bills to pay. The smart thing to do was to contact the Galactic Authority, hand Riel over to them, and continue on his way. But as he looked down at the small, shaking creature, he knew that he was not going to do the smart thing. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Riel nodded, and for the first time, something like hope appeared in those 4 wet eyes. "Come with me," said. "Let us get you some food, and then you are going to tell me everything about the ship that attacked your family, everything you can. Remember?" He held out his hand. Riel looked at it for a moment, then reached out with a small blue hand and took it. The creature's skin was cool and smooth, like touching a leaf. As led Riel out of the cargo bay, the ship's computer spoke again. "Captain, shall I cancel the intruder alert?" Looked down at Riel, who was still holding his hand tightly. "Yes," he said. "Cancel the alert and start scanning for any ships within 3 days travel distance. I want to know everything about what is out there." "Understood, Captain. May I ask why?" Did not answer. He just kept walking, leading the small alien child toward the kitchen, his mind already racing with plans that he knew were crazy. Riel looked up at him with those 4 big eyes. "You will help?" the creature asked, voice small and afraid. "You will help find my family?" Squeezed the small hand gently. "I will try," he said. "I promise you. Kid, I will try." Riel ate like someone who had forgotten what food tasted like. Sat across from the small creature at the tiny kitchen table and watched as Riel pushed ration bars into that small mouth as fast as possible. The creature did not even chew properly. It just swallowed and reached for more. "Slow down," said gently. "You will make yourself sick." the food is not going anywhere. Riel paused and looked at with those 4 big eyes, then the creature nodded and started eating more slowly, poured a glass of water and pushed it across the table. Riel grabbed it with both hands and drank until the glass was empty. More asked, "Please." As refilled the glass, he studied the small alien, now that Riel was in proper light and not shaking so badly, could see more details. The pale blue skin had small patterns on it, like the veins on a leaf. The 4 eyes blinked at different times, which was a little strange to watch. Riel's hands had 4 fingers each, longer and thinner than human fingers. "What are you?" asked. "I mean, what species?" "I have traveled through many parts of space, but I have never met anyone who looks like you." Riel swallowed another bite of food. "I and my people come from a planet called Prime. It is very far from here, very far from everywhere." Searched his memory. He had read about them once in a xenobiology database. During his Navy days, a peaceful species, plant eaters, no military, no weapons, no history of violence. They were known for their art and their music and their kindness. They were also known for being easy targets. "Tell me about the attack," said. "Tell me everything you remember." Riel's 4 eyes filled with tears again, but the creature took a deep breath and began to speak. "We were on a colony ship, 300 of my people traveling to start a new home on a planet called Green Haven. It was supposed to be safe. The route was supposed to be safe." Riel's voice cracked, "But then they came." "Who came?" "The scaled ones, big and tall with red eyes and teeth like knives. They came out of nowhere. Their ship was so much bigger than ours. They fired weapons at us. Our ship could not fight back because we had no weapons. We had nothing." Nodded slowly. He knew what species Riel was describing. 8 ft tall, covered in dark scales, born and raised for violence. Many of them worked as mercenaries and slavers because those were the jobs that paid the best and let them hurt people legally. "What happened next?" he asked. "They boarded our ship. They started taking people, anyone who tried to stop them. They." Riel stopped and covered those 4 eyes with small blue hands. "They killed them. They killed Elder. They killed my friend's father. They killed anyone who said no." Felt anger building in his chest like a fire. He had seen evil things during his time in the Navy. He had seen battles and death and cruelty, but there was something about hurting peaceful people, about attacking those who could not fight back, that made his blood boil. "How did you escape?" he asked. "Mama and Papa, they hid me in an escape pod with some other cubs. Mama said to be brave. Papa said to find help." Fresh tears rolled down Riel's blue cheeks. The pod launched, but something went wrong. The other cubs' pods went one way and mine went another. Then my pod stopped working. I was floating in the dark for so long, I thought I was going to die. "But you did not die," said. "You made it to my ship." Riel nodded. "I saw your ship through the window. I used my emergency suit to float over. I found a hole in your ship where air was coming out and I climbed inside. I am sorry. I know I was not supposed to, but I was so scared and so hungry." "You did the right thing," said. "You survived. That is what matters." He stood up and walked to the communication console on the wall. He pressed a button, and after a moment, a familiar voice came through the speaker. Wandering petal, this is Morning Bell. What is going on over there? My sensors picked up your intruder alert. The voice belonged to oldest friend and the captain of a sister cargo ship that was traveling the same route about 6 hours behind him. They had been partners for 5 years, watching each other's backs in the dangerous parts of space. I have a situation, said. I found a stowaway, a cub. Her family was taken by slavers. There was a long pause. Slavers out here. From what she describes, they hit a colony ship, 300 people. Another pause, longer this time. When spoke again, her voice was careful. I know that tone in your voice. I know what you are thinking. Do not do it. Do not do what? Do not try to be a hero. This is not our fight. We are cargo runners, not soldiers, not anymore. Looked over at Riel, who was watching him with those 4 eyes full of desperate hope. The creature understood enough of the conversation to know that was talking about helping. They have children on that ship. Families, innocent people who never hurt anyone. And what are you going to do about it? Attack a slaver ship with your one tiny pulse cannon. They will blow you out of the sky before you can even say hello. So I should just do nothing, just hand this kid over to the Galactic Authority and forget about her family. Yes, said firmly, that is exactly what you should do. Contact the authority. File a report, let them handle it. That is how these things work. And how long will that take? How long? Until the authority actually does something. Silence knew the answer as well as did. The Galactic Authority was big and slow, and did not care much about what happened in the Outer Rim. By the time they sent a ship to investigate, the slavers would be long gone, and all those would be sold to the highest bidder. Please, Riel said suddenly, the small voice cutting through the silence. Please help my mama and papa. I will do anything. I will give you anything. Just please help them. Heard sigh through the speaker. Is that the kid? Yes. Damn it, you know I cannot say no when there are kids involved. I know, that is why I called you. Another sigh. Fine, what is your plan? Because I know you. You already have a plan, do you not? Smiled for the first time since the alarm had woken him up. Not yet, but I am working on it. I need you to chain course and meet up with me, and I need you to help me make some calls. Calls to who? Everyone who owes us favors, everyone who might be crazy enough to help. That is not a very long list. It is long enough. Will you help me? There was a pause and then laughed. It was a tired laugh, but also a warm one. You are going to get us both killed one day, Park, you know that, right? Probably, but not today. Fine, I am changing course now. I will be there in 5 hours. Do not do anything stupid until I arrive. I will try. The communication ended. Turned back to Riel, who was staring at him with wide eyes. You will help? The creature asked. You will really help? Knelt down so that he was at Riel's eye level. I cannot promise anything, he said honestly. The people who took your family are very dangerous. I am just one person with one small ship. The chances of success are not good. Riel's eyes began to fill with tears again, but continued, I am going to try. I'm going to do everything I can to find your family and bring them back, okay? Riel threw small blue arms around Snake and hugged him tightly. The creature was shaking again, but this time it felt different. This time it felt like hope. Thank you, Riel whispered. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Hugged the small alien back and stared at the wall, already thinking about the impossible task ahead. Do not thank me yet, kid, he said. Quietly, we have a long way to go. 5 hours later, the morning bell dropped out of hyperspace and pulled up next to the wandering pedal. Watched through his cockpit window as the other ship came closer. The morning bell was slightly larger than his ship, with better shields and a faster engine. But it was still just a cargo ship. It was not built for fighting. None of their ships were built for fighting. That was the problem. Face appeared on his communication screen. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and short black hair that she always kept practical. She had been in the Navy even longer than she had left for the same reasons: too much politics, not enough action. Okay, she said without greeting. I am here. Now show me this alien cub you found. Turned his screen so that could see Riel, who was sitting in the co-pilot chair wrapped in a warm blanket. The small waved shyly as his expression softened just a moment. Hello, little one. What is your name? Riel. That is a pretty name. Looked back at. All right, you win. She is adorable. Now tell me your crazy plan. I do not have a full plan yet, admitted. But I have been making calls. I reached out to everyone I could think of. And is in. He says he owes me for that reactor incident 3 years ago. Raised her eyebrows. The salvage guy, he is not exactly a fighter. No, but he has equipment. Lots of equipment, metal debris, sensor jammers. Things that could confuse enemy scanner. He is 2 systems away and already heading toward us. Okay, who else? Now looked impressed. The combat medic. I thought she retired. She did, but she is between jobs right now, and she said she was getting bored. Smiled slightly. She also said that anyone who hurts children deserves what they get. I like her already. Anyone else? I am still waiting to hear back from a few people, but even if it is just the 4 of us, I think we can do something. Shook her head slowly. 4 people against a slaver ship. Do you know how crazy that sounds? I know. Their ships carry crews of at least 40. Professional killers, trained soldiers. They have weapons that could cut through our shields like paper. I know. And you still want to do this? Looked at Riel, who was watching the conversation with those 4 big eyes. The small creature did not understand all the words, but understood enough to know that the adults were talking about something dangerous. Her family is on that ship, said quietly. Her mother and father, her friends and neighbors, 300 people who have never hurt anyone in their lives. If we do not help them, no one will. Was silent for a long moment, then she sighed and rubbed her eyes. You know, I had a good thing going, safe cargo runs, steady pay, a nice quiet life. Then you had to go and find a crying alien kid. Is that a yes? That is a yes, you idiot, but we need a real plan, not just hope and good intentions. Grin. That is why I have you. You were always the smart one. Over the next several hours they worked on the plan. Arrived first, his big salvage ship looking like a flying junkyard. He was a large man with a loud laugh and hands that were always covered in engine grease. He hugged hard enough to lift him off the ground. Brother said happily, it has been too long, and you want me to help you attack slavers. This is the best day I have had in months. Arrived next. She was small and quiet. with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen too much death. She did not hug anyone, but she looked at Riel for a long time and then nodded. "I am in," she said simply. "Tell me what you need me to do." They gathered in the wandering petals small meeting room, 4 humans sitting around a table with star maps spread out in front of them. Riel sat in the corner watching and listening. "Okay," said taking charge. "Here is what we know. The slaver ship is probably a converted military cruiser called the Crimson Fang. It is registered to a mercenary group that operates in this sector. Based on the direction of Riel's escape pod, they are most likely heading toward the black market, which is about 4 days from here. So we have time to catch up," said. "Barely. If we push our engines hard, we can intercept them in about 3 days." Pulled up an image of a ship on her. "But here is the problem. This thing is a monster, heavy armor, military grade weapons, a crew of at least 40. We cannot beat them in a straight fight. So we do not fight straight," said. "We fight smart." "What did you have in mind?" Stood up and pointed at the image. "Are strong and well-armed, but they are also arrogant. They do not think anyone would be stupid enough to attack them. That is their weakness. Our stupidity is their weakness." Laughed. "I love it. Here is what I am thinking. You release your debris cloud first, all that junk you have been collecting, the old hull plates, the broken satellites, everything. Make it impossible for them to see clearly." Nodded. "I can do that. It will mess up their sensors for at least 10 or 15 minutes. Good. While they are blind, takes the morning bell and makes attack runs on their ship. Do not try to actually hurt them, just get their attention. Make them think you are the main threat." Frowned. "That sounds like I am going to be a target." "You will be, but you are the best pilot here. You can dodge their fire long enough for me to do what I need to do." "Which is what?" "I take the wandering pedal and slip underneath their ship while they are focused on you. I dock with one of their auxiliary airlocks, and then I board the ship." The room went quiet. Everyone stared at board the ship. Repeated slowly. "Just the 2 of us?" "Yes. Against 40. We will not fight all of them. We find the prisoners, free them, and get out quick and quiet." Shook her head. "That is insane. That is the most insane thing I have ever heard. You will be killed in 5 minutes. Maybe, but I have seen the inside of ships like this before." The snorts. "Prisoners will be in the cargo hold at the back of the ship. They will be at the front trying to deal with you and the debris cloud. If we are fast and lucky, we can get in and out before they even know we are there. And if you are not fast and lucky," shrugged, "then I guess I will die fighting. There are worse ways to go." The room was silent again. Riel stood up from the corner and walked over to the table. The small looked at each of the humans in turn. "You are doing this for my family," Riel said quietly. "You could die. Why, we are strangers. You do not know us." Looked at the others, then back at Riel. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said. "Because your family deserves to be free. Because someone has to stand up to the bad ones, or they just keep hurting people forever." Riel's 4 eyes filled with tears. "Humans are strange." Laughed. "You have no idea, little one. We are the craziest species in the galaxy." Stood up and checked her medical bag. "Enough talking. When do we leave?" Smiled. "Now we leave now." As they walked to their ships, grabbed his arm and pulled him aside. Are you sure about this? She asked. Quietly, really sure. Looked at Riel, who was watching from the doorway. No, he admitted, but I am going to do it. Anyway. Sighed and punched him lightly on the shoulder, then let us go save some aliens, you crazy bastard. 3 days later, they found the Crimson Fang. The slaver ship was exactly as ugly as I had expected. It was a massive thing, dark and covered in weapons, floating through space like a hungry predator. Compared to it, the 3 human ships looked like toys, small, weak, and completely harmless. That was what was counting on. All right, his voice came through the communication system. I am reading 43 life signs on the slaver ship, plus approximately 150 in what looks like the cargo hold. The prisoners said from beside she had moved to the wandering pedal for the boarding operation, her medical bag packed with supplies and her old Navy pistol strapped to her hip. They are still alive, Riel said from the back of the cockpit, voice trembling. With hope, my family is still alive. Looks like it, but we need to move fast. Took a deep breath. Okay. Everyone ready? Ready, said. Then let us do this crazy thing. Start the show. Salvage ship moved forward and opened its cargo doors. Out poured a massive cloud of debris, old hull plates broken, satellite parts, twisted metal beams, thousands of pieces of junk that had collected over years of salvage work. The cloud spread out in front of the Crimson Fang like a fog made of metal. Almost immediately, the slaver ship's communication system crackled to life. Unidentified vessels, this is the Crimson Fang. You are interfering with official business. Leave this area immediately, or you will be destroyed. Laughed through the comm system. Official business, is that what you call kidnapping innocent people, selling them like property? There was a pause, then a different voice came through, deeper and angrier. Who the hell are you? Just some humans passing through. We thought we would say hello. Humans? The captain sounded amused now. 3 human garbage ships want to fight us? This is a joke. Maybe, but jokes can still bite. The morning bell shot forward into the debris cloud, its small weapons firing. At the Crimson Fang, the shots were weak, barely scratching the slaver ship's heavy armor, but that was not the point. The point was to make noise. The point was to be annoying. The point was to make the look the wrong way. All weapons target that ship, the captain screamed. Blow them out of the sky. The Crimson Fang's guns began to fire. Huge blasts of energy that lit up the debris cloud like lightning in a storm. But was good, she was very good. Morning Bell danced and dodged, slipping between pieces of debris, using the metal fog as cover. Meanwhile, piloted the wandering pedal underneath the battle, with all the debris messing up their sensors and all their attention on, they did not notice the small cargo ship sliding toward their belly like a shadow. I see the auxiliary airlock, said, pointing at her screen, 30 m ahead. I see it. Hands moved across the controls, docking in 60 seconds. The wandering pedal kissed the bottom of the Crimson Fang with barely a sound. The docking clamps locked into place. The airlock hissed as it pressurized. We are in, said quietly. Riel, stay here. Lock the door behind us and do not open it for anyone except me or... Riel nodded, 4 eyes wide with fear. Please bring back my mama and papa. I will try, kid, I promise. And moved into the slaver ship. Corridors were dark and smelled like rust and fear. Red emergency lights flickered on the walls. Somewhere above them they could hear the shouting and running, all focused on the battle. Outside, "Cargo hold is this way," whispered, checking her 2 levels down. They moved fast and quiet, staying in the shadows. Twice they had to hide as soldiers ran past, but the lizard-like aliens were too focused on the fight to notice too. Small humans pressed against the walls. The cargo hold was guarded by 2 big ones, even by standards, carrying heavy rifles. They looked bored and annoyed, probably angry that they were stuck guarding prisoners while their friends got to fight. She looked back at him. They did not need words. After 6 years in the Navy together, they could communicate with just their eyes. Counted down on his fingers, 3, 2, 1. They moved at the same time. Hit the first guard with a stun grenade, the flash of light and sound sending them stumbling backward. Before the alien could recover was on him, slamming his pistol into the soft spot under this jaw. The guard dropped. Was even faster. She ducked under the second guard's rifle swing and drove her knife into the gap between his armor plates. That made a gurgling sound and fell. "Clear," said calmly, wiping her blade. "Open the cargo hold door." The smell hit him first. Too many bodies in too small a space with not enough food or water or fresh air. Then he saw them, over 100, crowded together in cages like animals, small ones and big ones, old ones and young ones, all of them looking at him with wide, frightened eyes. "It is okay," said, holding up his hands. "I am here to help. I am here to get you out." For a moment no one moved. Then a female pushed her way to the front of one of the cages. She had the same blue skin and 4 eyes as Riel, but older, with worry lines on her face. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. "My name is Park. I am a human. Your daughter found my ship." The female's eyes went wide. My Riel is alive. She is alive and safe on my ship. She asked me to come save you." The female started to cry. Others joined her, some crying with relief, others still too shocked to believe what was happening. Did not have time for emotions. "Start opening these cages. Everyone listen to me. We do not have much time. Follow me and do exactly what I say. Stay quiet. Stay together. Stay calm." Worked fast, breaking locks and opening cage doors. They poured out, stretching their tired limbs, holding each other, whispering thanks to the 2 humans who had come to save them. "How many?" asked. 147. Counted. "They are all here." "Good, let us move." They led them through the corridors. Long line of blue-skinned aliens, following 2 small humans through an enemy ship. It was slow and terrifying. Every corner a chance for disaster. They were halfway to the airlock when the alarm started. "Intruders detected in Sector 7. All hands to Sector 7. "They know we are here," said grimly. "We need to run." Grabbed his communicator. "We have the prisoners, but we have been spotted." "Understood. I'm increasing fire on their bridge. Get to the airlock now." They ran. They were weak and tired, but fear gave them energy. They ran through the dark corridors as soldiers started appearing behind them, firing weapons that burned holes in the walls. Turned and fired back his shots. Dropping 2. Did the same, her aim as perfect as it had been 20 years ago. Keep moving, shouted at them, do not stop. They reached the airlock just as a group of appeared at the other end of the corridor, stepped in front of the fleeing prisoners and opened fire, giving time to get everyone through. Come on, screamed. He fired 3 more times, then turned and ran. A shot hit him in the shoulder, burning through his jacket and into his flesh. He did not stop. He threw himself through the airlock just as slammed it shut. Go, 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 he shouted into his communicator. The wandering pedal detached from the Crimson Fang and shot away into space. Inside the cargo hold, 147 held onto each other as the ship shook and rocked. Riel pushed through the crowd and found her mother throwing small arms around her and crying so hard she could not speak. It is okay, baby, Riel's mother whispered, holding her daughter tight. It is okay, the humans saved us. Crazy, wonderful humans saved us. On the bridge of the Crimson Fang, the captain screamed with rage and ordered all weapons to fire on the fleeing human ships, but it was too late. The debris cloud blocked their targeting systems. By the time they could see clearly again, the humans and their rescued were already jumping to hyperspace. The Crimson Fang was left floating in space, damaged and humiliated, defeated by 3 cargo ships and 4 crazy humans who had decided to do the right thing. The Galactic Authority arrived 4 hours later. A massive cruiser dropped out of hyperspace, followed by 2 smaller patrol ships. They had received some emergency signal and come as fast as they could, which was not very fast at all. By the time they arrived, Shoulder had been bandaged by. They had been given food and water, and the 3 human cargo ships were floating peacefully in open space waiting. The authority officer who boarded the wandering pedal was an alien named Commissioner. He was tall and thin with large compound eyes and clicking mandibles that made strange sounds when he talked. He looked at the crowd of refugees, then at the 4 humans, then back at the Can someone please explain what happened here? He asked. Stepped forward, his shoulder hurt badly, but he kept his face calm. Slavers attacked a colony ship. They took 147 prisoners. We got them back. Blinked his compound eyes. You got them back how? You are cargo runners. Yes. You attacked a military cruiser with cargo ships. Yes. And you succeeded. Shrugged, then winced at the pain in his shoulder. We got lucky. Was quiet for a long moment. His mandibles clicked softly as he processed this information. The Crimson Fang is still in the area. Our sensors detected them fleeing toward the outer systems. They are damaged but still dangerous. We will pursue and bring them to justice. Good, said. Make sure you do. The commissioner looked at her, then back at you. Do understand that what you did was extremely illegal. Attacking another vessel, even a slaver or vessel, without authority permission is a serious crime. So is kidnapping people and selling them as slaves, replied calmly. That is not the point. The law exists for a reason. You cannot simply decide to become vigilantes whenever you feel like it. Was about to respond when a small voice interrupted. He saved my mama. Everyone turned to look at Riel, who had pushed through the crowd of the small alien child, walked up to Commissioner and stared up at him with those 4 big eyes. He saved my mama and my papa and all my friends. He did not have to help us. He did not know us, but he did it anyway. Because he is good. Riel's voice was shaking but determined. Are you going to punish him for being good? Looked down at the small, his mandibles clicked again, then he made a sound that might have been a sigh. No, he said finally, I suppose not, but please in the future contact the proper authorities before taking matters into your own hands. We will try, said, but sometimes the proper authorities are too slow. Did not argue with that. The authority ships took statements from everyone and began processing the rescued. Most of them would be transported back to their home world where they could start healing from their terrible experience. A few chose to continue to Green Haven, still determined to build their new colony. Before they left, the elders gathered to speak with and his friends. We do not know how to thank you, the oldest elder said. She was ancient and frail with pale blue skin that had faded almost to white. You risked everything for strangers. You saved our people when no one else would. It was the right thing to do, said. Simply. Perhaps, but many people see the right thing and do nothing. You saw the right thing and acted. That makes you special. The elder reached out and took his hands. In her thin, cool fingers, the people will never forget what you have done. If there is anything we can give you, anything you desire, name it and it is yours. Thought about it for a moment, he looked. They all looked back at him with tired but satisfied expressions. A full tank of fuel would be nice, he said, and permission to keep making cargo runs through space. The elder looked surprised. That is all. We could give you land, wealth, a position of honor among our people. I do not need any of that. I am just a cargo runner. I like being a cargo runner. I just want to keep doing my job. But why? You saved our people. You deserve a reward. Smiled softly. I did not do it for a reward. I did it because a scared little kid asked me for help. That is all. The elder stared at him for a long time. Then she laughed, a gentle sound like wind through leaves. Humans, she said, we have heard stories about your species, violent and aggressive, we were told, dangerous and unpredictable, but now I see the truth. You are something much more frightening. What is that? You are kind, genuinely, stubbornly, impossibly kind, and that kindness makes you capable of things that no other species would even attempt. She released his hands and bowed deeply. Thank you, Park, thank you for reminding us that good still exists in this cold universe. As they boarded the authority ships, Riel came running up too. The small alien hugged him tightly around the waist, small arms squeezing hard. Will I see you again? Riel asked, looking up with those 4 eyes melted down so they were face to face. I'm a cargo runner, kid. I am always passing through. Maybe our paths will cross again someday. Promise? I cannot promise, but I can hope. Riel nodded solemnly. Then the small reached into a pocket and pulled out something small and shiny. It was a stone, blue like skin, polished smooth by years of handling. This was my lucky stone, Riel said. Mama gave it to me when I was very small. She said it would keep me safe. And it did. It helped me survive until I found you. The small alien pressed the stone into his palm. Now I want you to have it so it can keep you safe too. Looked at the stone, then at Riel. His eyes felt strangely wet. Thank you, Riel. I will treasure it always. Riel hugged him one more time, then ran to join her parents on the Authority ship. As the ship lifted off and disappeared into the stars, stood and watched until it was completely gone. Walked up beside him. That was a nice thing she did. Yeah. You know, we are completely broke now. Right? That little adventure cost us 3 months of fuel credits. Looked at the small blue stone in his hand. He smiled. Worth it. Laughed and punched him on his good shoulder. Yeah, I suppose it was. They walked back to their ships. Together, was already talking loudly about the adventure, making it sound even more exciting than it had been. Was checking her medical supplies, quiet and calm as always. As climbed into the cockpit of the wandering pedal, his ship's computer spoke. Captain, where would you like to go next? Thought about it for a moment. There were deliveries to make, schedules to keep, bills to pay. The galaxy kept spinning whether you saved people or not. Set a course for the Meridian station. He said finally, we have cargo to deliver. Understood, Captain. Course plotted. As the wandering pedal's engines powered up, leaned back in his chair and looked at the stars through his cockpit window. Somewhere out there, Riel was heading home with her family. Somewhere out there, the slavers were running from the Authority, and somewhere out there, stories were already spreading about the crazy humans who had risked everything to save strangers. It was not much thought in the grand scheme of the universe. It was barely a drop in an endless ocean, but it was something. It was proof that one person could make a difference, even against impossible odds. And maybe that was enough. The wandering pedals jumped to hyperspace, and Park went back to being a cargo runner carrying goods across the stars and waiting for the next time someone needed his help. Because that was what humans did. They helped even when it was dangerous, even when it was stupid, even when everyone else said it was impossible. They helped anyway. And the galaxy was a little bit brighter because of it.